Welcome everyone to the New South Wales History Week webinar on Racecourse Burial Ground at Ulladulla on the South Coast. This was not supposed to be a webinar, it was supposed to be a face-to-face visit and walk around the burial ground. However, due to the COVID lockdown, stay-at-home orders, etc., we've had to revert to placing it online. Not many people actually realise that, they go through the roundabout at Ulladulla where McDonald's is. And next thing you know, they're actually driving over a burial ground. And we're going to be showing today the maps and the movement of the road so you can see exactly where the cemetery is, or the burial ground. It's not actually a cemetery, it is a burial ground. So this is why it now has a preservation order on the space in regards to the preservation of the known graves that are there. And there are 4 known headstones, and there are over 50 burials of pioneers from Ulladulla. My name's Kathy Dunn and we're a public historian, plus we also manage the regional website of www.ulladulla.info. So back in 1863, grounds was reserved for racecourse and recreation use. Now, a racecourse, we all know Racecourse Beach, but yes, they used to have horse races in the Illawarra Mercury back in the 1850s and the 1860s. There's the report of the horse races that were held at Racecourse. So it's actually quite a large area just south of Ulladulla. So the land was put aside, the whole reserve was put aside in 1863. However, the burial ground was laid out in July 1858. The burial ground is recorded as Racecourse Burial Ground, Racecourse Cemetery, Boat Harbour Cemetery, and also Roman Catholic Cemetery, Ulladulla, and also Church of England Cemetery, Ulladulla. Have to remember, in the 1860s, this was not the only burial ground or cemetery in the district. There are over 30 burial grounds, cemeteries, and private burial family plots on different properties surrounding the area. So there's quite a diverse range of burial locations here in the Milton-Ulladulla area. We do recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' history to protect and develop their diverse cultures, languages and local heritage. In this presentation, there is mention of Indigenous Australians who are deceased. So these are the 3 headstones that have been fenced off, and it was actually a bicentennial project by the local Apex Club. And this is the Millard family, and the Millard family were living in Ulladulla from the mid-1860s, and we all know Millard's Cottage and Millard's Creek. Now here is the location of the cemetery, and you can see that the oblong or rectangle that is for the burials actually crosses over the highway, or as today we would say, underneath the highway. And that's actually the theme of the New South Wales History Week for this year, is from the ground up. So every time you drive into Ulladulla from the south, or you're heading out down to Borley Point, you're actually driving over the cemetery. And research has shown that the area that we lost to the highway is actually the Roman Catholic section. How did this occur? Because in 1931, the highway was realigned, and on the surveyor's map, you can see the old Princess Highway, which was straight, and they diverted the highway over in 1931. When this land was surveyed, the surveyor kindly also marked the locations of the graves at the burial ground. And you can see on the right-hand side the 3 Millard Walter headstones, which are still there today. Many people think they were moved there because their location doesn't align up correctly with the highway. No, it's the other way around. The highway was moved. And you can see it's not just 3, that there were other in 1931, 33 this map is, that there were definitely a realignment of the highway, but also it's showing that there were more than just the 3 headstones that you can actually see at the front today. There's stories that we did interviewing some locals many years ago, and they talked about how they walked from Racecourse over to school as young kids, and they recall seeing old wooden crosses and other headstones in the burial ground. There's a close-up. So this is 1833. Sorry, 1933. The location of the burial ground. As you can see, yes, it goes under the highway, and it also goes under Hollywood Avenue, because Hollywood Avenue didn't exist back in 1933, it came later. And on both sides of Hollywood Avenue, and the northern boundary is parallel with Parsons Street. The eastern boundary is aligned with the original location of the Princess Highway or Marmarang Street. There are 80 known burials on the actual site, and they include names of Araluen, Bailey, Bolton, Bowen, Bradley, Buchan, as in Buchan Street, the Buchan family, Campbells, Condons, Coolies, Hessians, Johnsons, Kerrys, Lloyds, Mackays, Maguire. P. Maguire. He was actually a convict, and when he died, he was described as an old hand. What's an old hand? It means that he was an elderly gentleman, but he was also an old hand in regards to his trade and the fact that he was a convict, or he arrived here as a convict. There's members of the Temple family, the Seacombe family, Ryan family, and also the Mitchells and the Millards, of course. There are many infants there are many infants buried on this site, as well as Indigenous people. One such Indigenous person is Mary Maria Karawong, who died in 1888. And we all know the name of Karawong because of the bushfires 2 years ago, because it was called the Karawong Fire, and that was her land down at Karawong. The headstones, considering how close they are to salt water, salt air, have survived rather well. My system is saying that we possibly have dropped out on the internet, so I will continue in case it's another issue. And I keep saying 3, but there is another burial with a headstone, and it's Annie McKay. And many people miss this burial because it's towards the back. And the rest is just garden area. Where do we get some information on some of the burials? And the newspapers and also death certificates. So this is a newspaper report from the Sydney Morning Herald of Mrs. Mary Millard, who died the 7th of February 1883 at home in Church Street, Ulladulla, beloved wife of W. Millard, which is William Millard, and she was buried at the Ulladulla Cemetery in 1883. This burial notice is from the Kiama Independent and the Shoalhaven Advertiser in 1871. Why aren't I using the Milton Ulladulla Times? That's simply because the Milton Ulladulla Times didn't start till later on. So you have to actually use the Kiama papers, the Sydney Morning Herald, the Illawarra Mercury. On Thursday last, the remains of the late Mrs. Thomas Hessian, Sr., were consigned to the last resting place in the Roman Catholic burial ground, Ulladulla. And the item goes on to say that everyone in town came to the funeral, her cause of death, and also more about her life and her family. Now, that was on the 2nd of May, 1871. Her death certificate says that she was buried at the Ulladulla Cemetery, Racecourse, New South Wales. So you actually have to check the name variations of the cemetery. This is a death certificate of Margaret Campbell, also known as Jirowich. She died on the 16th of November 1896. Now, there's no proof or evidence that every person buried there had a headstone. The 1931 survey of the burial ground did not show potentially 80 headstones because the road had already been moved and it was just the remaining ones. And on this certificate, it gives her age. It says her father's not known, her father's occupation is not known, her mother's maiden name was Morris, an Aboriginal. The informant was John Pittman, her son-in-law of Ulladulla, and where buried, Racecourse, 2 words, cemetery near Ulladulla. So, when you're doing research of where your ancestors may be buried in the Milton Ulladulla area, you many times do actually have to obtain the death certificate to prove exactly. If you look up Racecourse online, you're not going to find a racecourse. But if you look up Racecourse Ulladulla, that is different. It will actually show you that we do have Racecourse Beach, but that entire area going right out to the going out to the Dunlewis Centre and literally up to Parsons Street was called the Racecourse. There is a Facebook group called the History of Milton Ulladulla Region. So all you have to do is search Facebook using the term History of Milton and Ulladulla Region, or just History of Milton and Ulladulla, you'll find us. So everyone's more than welcome to join that group, because all of us are in lockdown. Many people have been going through their old family photos of weddings and school photos, and we're getting into photos of homes now, because history just isn't what happened back in July 1858 when the Racecourse Cemetery was laid out, and they said, right, we'll use this location here for the burials. History is also what happened 10 years ago, what happened yesterday. So there's a lot of modern day heritage and history in that Facebook group. Where can you get information on the Racecourse Burial Ground of Ulladulla? The New South Wales Birth, Deaths and Marriages to obtain the death records. Trove, which is part of the National Library, where you can get access to the newspapers. And of course, we do have the regional website of ulladulla.info, and there is a page there where we do have a list of the surnames, not a list of all the individual burials, but just a list of the surnames. If you're wanting a lookup that you think you may have an ancestor or a family member who is buried at Racecourse, join the Facebook group, History of Milton Ulladulla Region, and we can do a lookup from there for you. That's all we have for today. I do apologise that I couldn't walk you around the cemetery, but remember, every time you drive south of McDonald's or Parsons Street, you are actually driving over the original burial ground for Ulladulla. There's no other cemetery in Ulladulla. All the other burial grounds and cemeteries, they are at Mollymook, Milton, and on the outlying farms out at Termeil, out at Woodburn, out at Woodstock. There's quite a few burials, and they were by church and denomination, where the Racecourse burial ground was not for one particular religion. It was a general cemetery, just as Mollymook or Sandwich Cemetery is today. It has its denominations in different sections, as did Racecourse Burial Ground, Ulladulla, New South Wales. Everyone have a good day. Thank you.